The sun hung low over the New Mexico desert, red and swollen like an old wound. Dust spiraled around the boots of Luke Carver, a cowboy with a bad leg, a worse temper, and exactly $12 to his name. He'd ridden 2 days without water, gambling on a rumor that the Apache chief White Eagle was willing to trade horses for coin. Luke needed one. His old mare, Dolly, had gone lame near Las Cruces. When he reached the Apache camp at dusk, the chief watched him from a ring of firelight, his face unreadable. Luke tipped his hat. "Chief White Eagle, I come to buy a horse. Got $12. The chief's eyes narrowed. "$12 is little," he said slowly, his English careful but clear. "But maybe enough, for something else." Luke frowned. "I just need a horse, old man." White Eagle said nothing. He whispered to a warrior beside him, who disappeared into the darkness. When he returned, 2 young women followed, both tall, dark-haired, proud-eyed. They stopped before Luke, silent. The chief stood. "For $12, cowboy," he said, "you may take them." Luke blinked. "What? No, I ain't." But the chief's gaze was iron. "They are my daughters. You give coin, you give promise. Apache promise cannot be broken." Luke stared, dumbfounded, as the girls stood beside his fire that night. He'd come for a horse. But for $12, he had bought himself trouble of a different kind. Their names were Nita and Tala. Nita, the elder, was quiet as shadow. Tala, younger, spoke English and scowled at everything Luke did. "You think Apache girls are cattle?" she snapped, crossing her arms. "You pay $12, and think you own us." Luke threw his hands up. "I didn't ask for this. I just wanted a horse." "Then you should have said so," Tala hissed. "Now you got us." Chief's word is law. They traveled together the next morning, headed toward Fort Bowie. Luke figured he'd explain the mess to the army and set the girls free. But as they rode through the desert, Luke walking beside them, leading a half-broken pony the chief had lent, he began to see something he hadn't expected. The sisters moved like the wind, alert, graceful, speaking to each other in low tones. When a rattler coiled near Luke's boot, Nita's arrow took it clean through the head before he could blink. That night, as the fire burned low, Tala asked him, "Why you travel alone, cowboy?" Luke stared into the flames. "Used to have a wife. She died. After that, folks and me, we stopped mixing much." Tala studied him quietly. "You think you're cursed," she said finally. "But maybe you're just lost." Luke didn't answer. But for the first time in years, he didn't feel entirely alone. By the 3rd day, men began to follow them, riders with rifles, dust trails in the distance. Luke spotted them first. "Bandits," he muttered. "They'll take anything, horses, gold, or people." When the ambush came near the dry creek bed, it was sudden and sharp. Bullets whined off rocks. Luke fired twice, missed once, hit once. But there were too many. Then Nita and Tala moved like lightning, bows flashing, arrows cutting the air. The bandits fell back in shock. Luke fought beside them, his old revolver barking flame until the last shot clicked empty. When the dust cleared, the riders were gone. Luke was bleeding from the arm, but grinning like a fool. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "You two saved my hide." That night, a familiar shadow appeared by the fire. Chief White Eagle rode up, alone. "You kept them safe," he said. "That is worth more than $12. Luke nodded. "They saved me, Chief. I didn't deserve that." White Eagle looked at his daughters, then back to Luke. "They have chosen their path," he said. "If they wish to stay, they stay." Nita smiled softly. Tala's eyes met Luke's. "We'll ride with you a while, cowboy," she said. "Maybe teach you how not to get shot." Luke laughed, shaking his head. "Reckon that's a fair trade." The 3 of them rode out at dawn, eastward, the desert wind at their backs. Somewhere between the silence and the sunrise, Luke Carver realized. He had come looking for a horse. But what he'd really found was a reason to keep riding. 3 weeks later, the desert had turned from gold to ash. Luke Carver, Nita, and Tala rode into Silver Crossing, a half-dead mining town clinging to the edge of nowhere. The streets were quiet, but the kind of quiet that hides behind shutters and gun barrels. Luke needed supplies, and the sisters needed rest. But Silver Crossing had its own ghosts. The barkeep's eyes narrowed as Luke stepped inside. "You got Apache with you," the man muttered. "Ain't safe for him here." Luke's voice was low. "Ain't safe for anyone if you keep talkin' like that." Still, whispers spread. By sundown, the sheriff came calling, backed by a few miners, all armed, all angry. "Cowboy," the sheriff said, resting a hand on his pistol, "we don't want trouble. But them girls don't belong here." Luke squared his shoulders. "They ain't belongin' to anyone. They ride with me." Behind him, Tala's hand hovered near her knife. Nita, calm as ever, watched the men with eyes that missed nothing. The standoff stretched thin, until a rider appeared on the ridge, framed by firelight and dust. White Eagle. The chief rode down slow, his feathers painted crimson for battle, his eyes dark as a storm. The townsfolk backed away. "You speak of belonging," he said, his voice carrying like thunder. "But these are my daughters, and their choice is their own." He turned to Luke. "You gave coin, cowboy. You gave blood. Now you give them freedom. Do you accept?" Luke took off his hat, the desert wind tugging at his coat. "I do," he said simply. Nita smiled, a small, proud smile. Tala stepped forward, close enough that he could see the dust on her cheek, the fierce light in her eyes. "You ever ride north, Luke Carver," she said softly, "you'll find us by the Red Canyon. Maybe bring that $12 horse next time." Luke chuckled. "If I can keep him from throwing me." They clasped hands once, firm and silent, no promises, just understanding. Then the sisters turned their horses and rode with their father, vanishing into the long, red horizon. Luke stood there until they were gone, the town empty again except for the sound of wind and the soft jingle of his spurs. He climbed onto his horse, the scruffy Mustang the chief had lent him, and looked east. "Guess I finally got what I paid for," he muttered, smiling. "Ain't a horse, but it'll do." Then he rode on, a lone rider under a burning sky, chasing whatever the next sunrise would bring. It was spring again before Luke Carver saw the Red Canyon. He'd spent the winter working as a wrangler up near Santa Fe, saving what little he could, sleeping in barns, fixing fences, staying out of trouble. But no matter where he went, his thoughts wandered back to the desert, to the two sisters who'd changed his course, and to the promise he never quite made. So when the snows melted and the prairie turned green, he saddled his horse, the same Mustang the chief had loaned him, and rode south. Days later, the land opened into stone and color, cliffs burning like copper, the air filled with hawk cries. And there, by the river, he saw them. Nita and Tala. They were tending horses, real ones this time, a whole herd running free through the canyon basin. When they spotted Luke, Tala grinned wide and waved, while Nita's quiet smile said everything words couldn't. Luke rode down slow, tipping his hat. "Looks like you two found yourselves a good piece of the world." Tala laughed. "We built it. Father's village moved here after the rains. You see that herd?" She pointed. "They're ours. Wild ones, half Mustang, half Apache magic." Luke whistled low. "Guess I finally found where the good horses went." The chief appeared from a tent nearby, older but still proud. "Carver," he greeted. "You came back." Luke nodded. "Had to return your Mustang. He's still half wild, like his owners." White Eagle smiled faintly. "You keep him. He rides better with a man who's learned what freedom costs." There was silence, only the sound of wind through rock. Then Tala stepped closer, her voice soft. "You never told us what you were looking for, Luke." He looked out toward the sunset, thinking. "Didn't know till now. Maybe I was just looking for a place that didn't feel empty." Tala's gaze lingered on him. "You found it." He smiled. "Reckon I did." They shared a quiet meal that night, corn, beans, and laughter under the stars. When Luke saddled up at dawn, both sisters were there to see him off. "Don't get lost again," Tala teased. Luke grinned. "Not this time." He rode out through the canyon, the red cliffs glowing in the morning sun. Behind him, the voices of the sisters echoed faintly, bright, wild, and free. He'd come into this land for a horse, spent $12, and walked away with something no gold could buy, a place to belong, even if he had to keep riding to find it again. As the desert stretched before him, Luke Carver tipped his hat to the rising light. "Worth every penny," he said, and rode on.